everybody, and welcome back to another video. As you would have seen by the montage, I've had a very slow, relaxing morning. It is my day off. I woke up to rain, which was a tad annoying because I was hoping for some sunshine. But as you would have seen by my last clip, the rain has stopped. So it's dry, it's quite warm, but the sun's just not shining. It's pretty grey, but there are some gaps. So I'm hoping that the sun's gonna come out a little bit. But anyway, I wanted to do a little video touching upon living in Sydney, and I just wanted to talk about, I don't really want to so much give like advice, because I'm kind of someone that believes that you should kind of make up your own mind and make your own decisions. But I do think that it's good to talk about these things, and I think by talking about these things, people then come up with their like answer by discussing it, because it's maybe taking your brain to places which you hadn't been to yet and thought of yet. So I want to talk about it. I don't so much want to talk about moving to Australia and like my whole experience and tips, because I have spoke about that before. I actually did a podcast episode which was more based on that kind of stuff. It was like me giving some tips into like moving into Australia and like what helped me. And I did touch upon some experiences I've had out here, and I did touch upon some stuff that I'm going to talk about today. But today I want to specifically talk about how people are feeling living in Sydney at the moment. And again, this isn't for everyone, but I'm part of a Facebook page called Irish Around Sydney, and as are probably a lot of you watching, basically most people that live in Sydney of my kind of age who have just moved out here, or have some point been like a backpacker themselves, are part of that Facebook group. And I'm seeing, again, like I spoke about this in my podcast, and I felt like I didn't see it for a while, but I'm starting to see a lot more posts again of people talking about like how they're feeling living in Sydney. And basically they're not good feelings. They're people that are like asking for help. They're saying they're struggling. They're asking, how do you know when it's time to go home, because they're just not enjoying it. They're struggling to make friends. Maybe their friendship group they just don't feel like they fit in with. Struggling to find work, apartments. They're having problems living with their housemates. It's just not working out for them. And I'm starting to see more posts again come up like that. And I almost kind of respond to them in my head, but I never bother commenting anything. But I always find myself kind of giving like my feelings to what they're saying in my head. And I thought, do you know what? This actually might help people. So I'm gonna make a video about it, and so that's what I'm doing. So I just wanna talk out loud, and I hope it can help anyone that's living in Sydney at the moment. And this can even really apply if you're living in any new place, anywhere else in Australia, or you've just moved abroad. I hope you can kind of relate it to your own situation. So firstly, on a lighter note, I wanna touch upon not everyone, but majority of people think that when you move here, it's going to be sunshine all the time. And as you can see by my morning montage, it's just not. It's simply not sunshine all the time. Yes, it's sunshine a lot of the time, and the weather is much better than back at home. We do have days that feel like being back at home, where the weather is so random, it's tipping it down, and it's rainy and windy, and then the sun will suddenly come out, and it will just be so hot. There was a time, like literally a couple of weeks ago, where it was literally this was actually St. Patrick's weekend. The Sunday, it was almost 40 degrees. It was so hot, so still, like no wind. I'm trying to think back now. Yeah, I remember it just being very like still, no wind, blue sky, almost 40 degrees. The next day, it literally dropped right down to like 22 degrees or something. So the weather can be very random, and especially if you go like to other parts of Australia. Like when I did my farm work, I was doing it in far north Queensland, and that weather was so erratic and extreme. So yeah, firstly I want to say that it does rain here. And I know that sounds so obvious, but I find like even when I talk to friends and family back at home, they'll talk about how bad the weather is at home, and I'm like, we get bad weather too. Like we get really bad storms, and cold days. Yes, it's not as much, but we do still get it. So if you've just arrived in Sydney and it's raining, let's not jump to, oh, like this is so shit, like I thought it would be pure sunshine arriving here. Guys, it still rains, but give it a couple days and the sun will probably come out. So I wanted to touch upon that as a lighter note, because that is actually, funny enough, it is a conversation I find myself having with a lot of people that have just arrived out here when I'm at work and with family and friends. So please don't get too fixated on the fact that you arrive and it's raining, because weather as a whole is better than back at home still. And from that lighter note, I want to lead into the main thing I wanted to talk about. And I did a video on this in life in general not that long ago, and it was about the fact that we are simply overcomplicating everything for ourselves. And I think a lot of people do that about living here in Sydney. And if they've made the right decision, I think we simply overcomplicate it for ourselves. And I've definitely been there. And like 100%, guys, like I've lived in Australia now for about 6.5 years, and majority of that time has been living in Sydney. So there's definitely been times when I've overcomplicated things for myself. But all that does, guys, when we're overcomplicating things, before I go into that, let's break down what I mean by overcomplicating things. What I mean is, I find a lot of us living out here, and especially newer people, and I did this too, so I'm judging myself here. I'm not judging anyone, but these are all things I've done. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with it. But the most important thing is to realize when you are doing it and like get yourself out of the mindset. Is we literally would have just arrived out here, and we're like looking at people that have lived here for years and years, and they're in like a comfortable job, they've got their own apartment, they might have made a relationship out here, and things just kind of look good for them. We look at that and we're like, bear in mind, we've only just been out here for like a month or something, we've literally just landed, we're fresh off the boat kind of thing, and we're looking at that and like other people's lives, and we're thinking, why haven't I got that? Like, why haven't I got a job yet? Why haven't I found an apartment yet? Why am I still sofa surfing? Like, why haven't I got a friendship group yet? And we're like, just looking into everything way too much. And this is what we do, right? This is what we do with like a lot of things in life. We stress ourselves out. We look into everything in so much detail. We overanalyze everything. We see someone who it looks like from the outside has it all and question, why do we not have that yet? Rather than thinking, okay, well, they've been out here X amount of time, so I'm sure they've faced these problems as well, but how did they get to where they are now? And instead of breaking it down like that, we just want everything straight away, and we put so much pressure on ourselves to have that all right away. We like want everything straight away, and we expect everything straight away, because like I said, you're looking at someone who's lived out here for a long period of time, who has worked hard to build all of that up. And I think because a lot of people come out here because of how they see people living out here on social media, they see all of that, and they see, you know, someone living in Australia in a relationship, or they're traveling a lot, and all these great things. They're seeing pictures of like a sunny day on the beach, and in your head you expect to arrive and it be like that straight away. But you arrive on a rainy day, you haven't got an apartment yet, a job yet, and you suddenly have the realization that, oh shit, I need to do all of these things. And that's when you almost start like punishing yourself, because you're like, why haven't I got all those things? And I think that's what's happening. And again, instead of looking at the bigger picture and remembering that Australia, it's not some like fantasy world. You still have to live normal life like you do back at home. Like you still need a job, a place to live, to build up friendship groups. Like I see so much on these posts, like, oh, like they talk about the Australian dream, like so much for the Australian dream and all of this kind of stuff. And yes, things are so bloody expensive in Sydney, and I would say they definitely have got more expensive. Feels like more people are coming over here. Like definitely things in some way have got harder, but then in some ways it hasn't changed at all. It's always been the case that when you move here, you need to find a job, you need to find an apartment, make a friendship group. Like none of that has changed. Yes, like I said, like the prices of things have changed, but a lot of people talk about finding work getting harder, which maybe it has, I don't know. But all I know is that when I arrived back in Sydney from my farm work around, let's say 5 years ago, I found it so hard to find work. I found it just as hard then as I did the last time I was trying to look for work, which was more recently in the last like year or two. So yeah, like I think we overcomplicate things and we put all this stuff in our head that things have got so much harder, this, that and that, and it's just, yeah, overcomplicating things for ourselves. And like I mentioned it in the last video when I talked about overcomplicating life, and I said how if we're being in Sydney are acknowledging that prices have really gone up and more people are now moving out here, if we're acknowledging those things, then we also need to acknowledge, yes, it might be harder to find an apartment, to find a job. It's gonna take a little bit longer, and we just have to stick with that, and it will pay off. You know, we're, like I said, let's recap. We're acknowledging prices have gone up. We're acknowledging it feels like a lot more people are moving into Sydney, kind of since like lockdown and since like we were able to fly again and arrive into Australia. It does feel like there's been a massive bunch of people coming over here. We've acknowledged that, so we need to then acknowledge that timelines for people coming here now may just be that little bit longer to find work and an apartment, which isn't the case for everyone. Like I said, I found it really hard and it took me a long time to find work and an apartment even back then, a few years back. So like, I don't know, but whatever. So yeah, we need to acknowledge that, you know, things may take longer to get set up out here. And I think what's happening is, instead of just realizing and acknowledging that and just going with it, we jump into all of these things like this is just never going to work for me. Maybe this was the worst decision. Maybe this was such a bad decision. I shouldn't have done it. This isn't the place for me. And we jump into all of these things, which is then, I think, making us writing these posts on Facebook like, how do you know when it's time to leave? Like, this isn't working out for me, blah, blah, blah. When I feel like we've all been in that situation out here, but the thing that changes from person to person when you're in that situation is how you react from it. And look, I understand it's not for everyone, it's just not, and maybe for you it's just not, and you want to go back home, and that's fine. But if you're one of those people that tend to overthink everything, maybe that's actually what's happening, and it just, like I said, you just need to spend that little bit more time and take that little bit more time out here, a little less pressure on yourself, and things could work out absolutely amazing, and you could be so happy that you stuck it out. So yeah, I think the thing that just separates person to person out here is we've all been there, but it depends how we react in that situation and what we do with that, as to if we find ourselves living here longer term or going back home. Another thing I touched upon is I see a lot of people being like, so much for the Australian dream, like this isn't what it's cracked up to be and all of this kind of stuff. But, and again, yes, it's not for everyone, but like, I don't know how to word this one. Guys, it is still the dream. Like, no, there is no dream in real life that is going to be 100% amazing and perfect all the time. You could be a billionaire, being able to do what the hell you want, fly here, there, and everywhere, and still have problems, but it doesn't mean you're not living the dream. You know, like if you were suddenly handed X amount of money that allowed you to do all the things you've always wanted to do, you would call that living the dream, but you would still have problems. You're still going to have problems with friendships, with family. Bad things are still going to happen in your life. It's not all suddenly fixed because you have X amount of money, but you are still living the dream because you're able to do all the things you wanted to. And that's kind of how I look at living in Australia, in the sense that yes, not everything is 100% all the time. Of course it's not. We're still living real life. Like, we still need to work to earn money. Like, you don't just land in Australia and it's like this magical world that you, like Animal Crossing, where you shake the trees and money falls out and then you're off to the beach with this money from the tree. And you know, it's not some like fantasy magic world. Like, you still have to like work like a normal human being to make your money. You still need to find an apartment in order to be able to live in one, and find a group of friends. Like, I don't know, like, sorry, it just gets me when people say about this dream thing. I'm like, well, what did you think it was gonna be like when you came out here? Because in the real world, nothing is perfect 100% of the time, but we are still living by these amazing beaches. We still can literally jump in our car on the weekend and travel like an hour out, and you're in like these incredible places, like, and it's like being on holiday, but you've literally just got in your car and drove like an hour. Like, you have the Blue Mountains if you're into like more like bush and greenery and hikes. You have like places like Palm Beach if you're more into like that kind of beachy coastal vibe. Like, there's so, and again, you can just jump on a plane for like an hour or two and you're, you know, in desert land. And it's just like, it's still the dream, but you still are gonna face normal problems. And that's where you need to think, if that's made you think, oh yeah, that's actually so true, although I've got problems, I'm also able to do and see all of these things that I couldn't back at home, then I think you're on the right track. I think you're in the right place. It's just going to take a little bit of work in order to feel settled out here. But if you're like, I don't care about all of that, if you're listening to me and you're living in Sydney and you're like, I don't care, that doesn't do it for me, then maybe you are in the wrong place. If you kind of came here just because you thought it was going to completely change your life, or you came here because you've seen all your friends here, then maybe that wasn't the right reason to come out here. There's so many people that would prefer to live in places in Europe, you know, with, you know, those people that say there's not enough history for me there. Like, I want to be able to explore castles and all of that kind of stuff. Then yeah, maybe you're not in the right area. If you're one of those that needs to be closer to your family, maybe you're not living in the right place. But if you're listening and you're like, that is so true, then trust me, you are in the right place. But it's just going to take a little bit more time to feel settled. Nothing good, well, most good things in life don't come to you easily. You have to work for it, and it takes time. I genuinely did not feel settled in Australia until about, I would say, 2.5 years or something, because again, I had to do my farm work for my second and third year. So I was a bit here, there and everywhere. I didn't have like a solid friendship group. And again, like, I feel like I have lived so many different lives out here because I've lived in different places. I've had different friendship groups along the way. I've made the best friends ever, and then they've gone back home. And it's just how it is. It's just how it is. And if I was at every obstacle to say to myself, I've made the wrong decision, this isn't right for me, this has gone wrong, I would have gone home a long time ago. But guys, that's life, and that's the beauty of life. Things are going to constantly change, and they're going to change even more for you when you're living away from home. That's to be expected. And especially in Sydney. Sydney is a kind of place where people kind of they come through and then they leave. So even for Australians, there's a lot of Australians I talk to who are literally here for work and to make money, but they don't see themselves here long term. And maybe their families live out more in the suburbs or in another state, in like Queensland, whatever it is. And again, a lot of people, you know, English, Irish, whoever it may be, kind of come here for a couple weeks just to, you know, maybe they're traveling the East Coast, come to Sydney for a little bit, maybe to earn a bit of money, and then they're off again, off on their travels, off home, off to another part of Australia. It is kind of a place where people kind of just go through and then they relocate, and that's just how it is. And if you want to make it work out here, you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with being flexible and adaptable to living here. And that is the same with anything in life. Think of all the different things you've been through in life, the different places you've lived, the different friendship groups you've had, like at school. Like, you went the whole way through school. I'm sure you probably had different friendship groups through school. I'm sure you probably was one type of person at some stage in your life, and then you grew up and you turned into another type of person. Friendship groups change. You had this job, then you had that job, and it's just life. And that's what happens out here too. And it's just about sticking with it. And maybe that's just the beauty of life. And in years to come, you're going to have so many different stories of all the different lives that you've lived. And I love it. And I didn't love it at the start. You know, it becomes exhausting at times. It really does. It becomes tiring. It becomes exhausting. And you're like, just give me a break. Like, you know, when all these visa issues are happening, like, I've been in tears at times. I remember being in tears when I was doing my farm work, because I was on that bloody banana farm and my body was just exhausted, and mentally I felt drained. I did not like it at all. I literally hid in my room when I was in the hostel towards the end because I was just exhausted. But I knew I had to do it to get my 3rd year visa, because that was when I was doing my 6 months. And yeah, like, it was hard bloody work and I felt exhausted, and I'm like, why does Australia make us do this to get our visa? But they do, or at least they did for the UK at the time. So I had to do it to get the outcome I wanted. Like I said, not everything's going to come to you easy, and some things are going to be really hard work out here, but if you want it to work, then it will. And yeah, again, with the visa situation, you're like, give me a break. Like, I remember, like, obviously my first 3 years, it was just like a year each visa. So, which isn't long at all, because you're enjoying your first half of the year, but then you know towards the second half that you've got to then think about the next visa. And guys, it's exhausting, but if you want to be able to live here and you want to be able to stay, these are just the things that you have to kind of work through. And again, that's the beauty of life. And we're all in it together. You know, you're not the only one who's felt how you're feeling and had to do the things that you're doing in order to live in Sydney and stay in Australia long term. Another big thing I think that will really affect how people feel about staying in Australia is the kind of feeling like alone feeling, and maybe like not being able to find like your tribe and your friendship group. And again, I get it. There's been stages out here where I've had massive friendship groups and I've never really felt alone, and then there's been times out here where I've literally felt very alone and only really had myself. And again, that's another one of those things that you just have to go through to make it work out here. And I know that's probably not the advice you want, like, because you're hoping for some, you know, secret that, you know, will make all of this better, but there's not. Again, it's just one of those things that you have to work through to make it work. And you may feel so alone at the start of the year, but by the end of the year, you might have this massive friendship group that you've then made that you're like, I am so glad I stuck this out, because that's just what it's like being out here. And the thing I would say, which helped me massively, and I talk about this in other videos, is spending time alone and being okay with spending time alone and seeing the benefits in that. And please go and watch my video where I talk about that, because I'm not going to touch upon that all now. But if you struggle with spending time alone, or you love spending time alone and, you know, you feel a bit of a loser for liking that, go to my video because it will help you massively. But yeah, it's another one of those things that you have to understand. Like, you've moved to another country, you've moved to the other side of the world. Of course you're not going to have a friendship group straight away, unless a lot of your friends from home are out here, or you have mutual connections and stuff, which when I first landed, I was lucky enough to have the odd connections out here, which helped me a lot. So if you do have mutual connections, do not be afraid to reach out, because people are so much more helpful out here. People will help more than you realize. But yeah, you're moving to another country. It's like when you start school or you start uni, you don't put that much pressure on yourself, because you know you don't know anyone, and it's just obvious everyone's in the same boat, like trying to make friends and make a friendship group. It's the same thing when you move abroad. Just have it in your head that you might have to just spend a little bit of time on your own from time to time, but eventually you will hopefully build up friends. And again, at the start, like, you can't be picky, because of course you're not going to straight away, well, most people aren't going to straight away find people that they connect with straight away, because it just doesn't work like that in life. Especially as we get older, it kind of feels harder to make friends. But yeah, be okay with spending some time alone, and understand that building up friends and a friendship group takes time. Which kind of leads me to another point that I talk about in my podcast. A lot of people, and I think this is because of lockdown obviously put a hold on people's lives for a good few years. So I do find a lot of the time people that are coming out now are coming out older than when I came out. Like, for example, I came out when I was 22, whereas a lot of people now, I mean, this is something that's always kind of stayed, but it's just something this is something that's always kind of been the case, but it's something that I've definitely noticed happen more since lockdown, and lockdown putting a hold on people's lives. And I'm finding people are coming out kind of older now, which, guys, it's gonna make things harder, because I think as you get older, you naturally put more pressure on yourself anyway as to what stage of life you're in. And you kind of realize, shit, like time goes fast, like I need to get myself together, kind of thing. So if you're already feeling like that, moving to another country and trying to start a new life is just going to heighten that feeling even more. So for you to just put even more pressure on yourself is crazy. And I know this is all easier said than done. Like, trust me, I put a lot of pressure on myself. But you're older and you're putting pressure on yourself to be at a certain time of life and phase of life. And then you're moving to another country and you're putting all of that other pressure on yourself about making new friends, finding a place to live, finding a workplace. So of course it's gonna feel hard, guys, and it was never meant to be easy anyway. And I just hope by the things I've spoke about, you can understand that maybe you're thinking this way because you are simply overcomplicating things for yourself, and you're being just that little bit too hard on yourself. Just give yourself a break. Like, life is hard and life is tough, and moving to another country and a city is bloody hard, and it's a lot to think about. Sorry guys, I keep playing with my hair, that's probably so distracting. But when I get proper into my talks, I'm like here, there and everywhere, and I'm like trying to get all my words out. My brain's just moving so fast. But yeah, it was never meant to be easy. Life is tough, life is hard. Moving to a new place is bloody hard. Moving to a city is hard, especially a bloody expensive city is hard, but that is life. And even if you moved back home, you're going to be facing obstacles and hard times as well. So it's just, where do you want to be? Where do you want to plan yourself right now? And only you can decide that. And really, that is the answer. Only you know where you want to be. But if it's the case that after listening to this, you're thinking, yeah, maybe I'm just being too hard on myself, I'm overcomplicating everything, then maybe you are in the right place, and don't make any rash decisions, because you've got to give things time. And personally for me, being out here and showing myself that I can do this, and pretty much on my own, and I can live in another country and make a life for myself and love it the majority of the time, it's just made me feel like I am more capable of more, and it's just opened up so many more doors for me. And not just because of where I'm living, it's not just like a Sydney and Australia thing, but what it is it's the fact that I've proved to myself that I can do it and I can push through those hard times and, like I said, make a life for myself. And so because of that mentality, it's just like, you talk about growth, right? Like mindset growth and opening your mind to see the bigger picture and seeing all these things that you are so capable to do. And moving away for me was one of those things that really opened my mind, and it blew my mind. And I'm like, oh my God, I can actually like live in another country. Like, I'm from a small town and I didn't go to uni or anything, so I had never lived in a big city. I had literally lived in a village my whole life up until I moved out here. So for me it was like a massive change. But back at home I had always dreamt of living in a place like Australia, but it was always just a dream. I didn't think that it was gonna really be my reality. It was like a dream that I thought that would be amazing. Like, whenever I watched films where they live by the beach, I'd be like, oh my God, that looks amazing. And yes, I lived by a beach back at home, but let's be honest, the beaches in Australia are just mental. They are so cool and just amazing. And we have the weather for it the majority of the time. So when I did move to Australia, and I'd wake up every day, I'd think, I'm actually living in Australia. Like, I'm living that thing that once was a dream to me, and I'm actually able to do it. Like, I just remember thinking that a lot of the time. And like, when I was working on the farm, like when I was doing the farm job that I actually enjoyed, I'd think, oh my God, like, what am I doing? Like, I just laughed to myself. I was like, I'm actually doing this. And the more times I felt like that, the more I was like saying yes to these opportunities. Usually I might say no to, because I'd be too shy or nervous and just think, no, I can't do that. And I just found myself saying yes to more things because I was showing myself more and more, I can do this. And yeah, it's just mind-blowing really. And I'm sure there's some of you watching this that can relate, and I just hope that you guys struggling can see where I'm coming from and can see the benefits. And another thing that everyone said, which I didn't want to touch upon too much because everyone says it, is if you're struggling in Sydney, try somewhere else in Australia. When I talk about living here long term, I don't talk about living in Sydney long term. When I feel at most in Australia, it's been when I'm like on the farm, or when I was far north Queensland in the more tropical areas. That's when I feel at most in Australia, and where I've probably felt like the happiest as a whole. So yeah, if it's not working for you in Sydney, it doesn't mean it's not working for you in Australia. Like, just go and explore more places and do it alone. I did many of trips on my own, and I did one not that long ago to Brisbane and then the Gold Coast. I did it by myself and then met a few friends along the way. Just explore more of Australia. That you might not love Sydney, but you might love other parts of Australia. You're not, if you just come here and you stay in Sydney or Melbourne, you're not getting the full Australian experience. I promise you that. Go do a road trip around Australia at some stage, even if it's just for the weekend. And if you're living in Sydney, go to the Blue Mountains, go to the national parks, go and see more than just the city, because there's so much more to Australia. And do it alone. Like I said, if you don't have a friendship group, do it alone. I did a lot of stuff on my own, and yes, at times I would think, oh, I wish I had someone to share this with, but when you look back, you'll be so happy that you did that. And it will change your mindset on how you view Sydney, just getting out of the city from time to time. But yeah, sorry if I got all a little bit scatty, but I got a little bit excited talking about that, and I'm sure I probably missed some parts I wanted to say, but I just wanted to talk from the mind rather than write notes and everything. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope it can be helpful. And love you all lots if you got this far, and thank you so much for watching. And I know it's tough living in Sydney. I don't mean to sound brutal when I'm like, that's just life, but at the end of the day, it is just life, and that's just how things are. And we do overcomplicate things sometimes, and we do expect too much sometimes. So yeah, love you all lots, and I'll see you all soon.